After getting into a life-altering accident, my parents decided to kick me out since my golden sister was visiting from overseas with her new partner and they thought having a cripple like me around would be a bad look with nowhere to go. I called my estranged grandmother, who supposedly hated us, but her response left me shaken and now I know the truth about my family. 4 months ago, I was in a terrible accident that left both of my legs paralyzed. That day started like any other. My best friend, Elaine, was driving, and we were both chatting away as we always did. Elaine and I had grown up together. We had known each other for as long as I can remember. She was more like family to me, and we had seen each other through lots of ups and downs. Looking back, that particular day felt so ordinary. We were celebrating, really. Both of us had just been accepted into the same university, and we couldn't contain our excitement. This was something we dreamed about together for years, going off to the same college, being roommates, navigating young adulthood side by side. There's a special kind of excitement in dreams coming true, and ours was finally within reach. I remember feeling so happy, laughing at some silly joke she made. Then suddenly, our car was hit. In a single brutal moment, everything changed. There was no warning, no time to brace ourselves. I could not breathe and that's the last thing I remember clearly. The next thing I knew, I was waking up disoriented and in excruciating pain, screaming as I took in the horrifying scene around me. The car was flipped upside down. The world had turned on its head and everything was chaos. I turned to see Elaine and she wasn't moving. I just remember screaming her name again and again trying to wake her up. When the ambulance finally arrived, I was relieved as the paramedics began to pull me from the wreckage. I remember screaming for them to check on Elaine. She was slumped over completely unresponsive and I felt a growing panic in the pit of my stomach. My heart hammered with dread and in that moment nothing else mattered but her. I still couldn't wrap my head around what had just happened but at the moment I knew I needed them to look after her, to make sure she was okay. My own pain was overwhelming, but somehow my mind was so fixated on Elaine that I didn't even notice my legs, how I couldn't feel them, couldn't move them. It wasn't until the paramedics pointed it out that the realization started to sink in. But even then, I felt numb, almost disconnected from my own injuries. As we sped towards the hospital, my whole focus was on Elaine, on willing her to be okay, to somehow make it through this. Once we reached the hospital though, my worst fears were confirmed. Elaine was declared dead upon arrival by the doctors. I started to scream and cry. No, she couldn't just be gone like that. It didn't matter that the doctors and nurses were talking to me, rushing me into surgery to try and save what they could. All I could think about was that Elaine, my lifelong friend, my other half was gone. It felt unreal and impossible. I went through multiple surgeries in the following days as the doctors tried to repair the damage in my broken body. The pain was relentless and the recovery felt like an endless blur. When I finally woke up after one of the surgeries, my parents were by my side. My mom hugged me and cried. My dad seemed visibly shaken and couldn't even bring himself to look me in the eye. I was grateful for them to be there for me, for their love and presence, but I could see the heartbreak in their faces. The doctors eventually came to inform me of the extent of my injuries, of the fact that I could never use my legs again. The shock hit me hard, but as devastating as the loss of my legs was, nothing compared to the loss of my best friend. Elaine was gone and there was nothing anyone could do to bring her back. She was only just beginning to live her life with dreams and plans that would now go unfulfilled. I mourned her deeply and I still continued to grieve for her. She didn't deserve to lose her life because of the mistake of the other driver who came onto our lane and hit our car. My heart aches for her every day knowing that she'll never get to experience the future we dreamed about together. Since the accident, my parents became my caregivers, something none of us could have anticipated. They've shown up for me in ways I can't begin to describe, doing everything they can to make my life even a little bit easier. But if I'm honest, it's been incredibly hard for all of us. Adjusting to life without being able to move around on my own is a struggle I face daily. Simple tasks I once did without a second thought in getting out of bed, grabbing a snack or just reaching for something across the room now feels monumental. I rely on them for almost everything from the smallest daily routines to the more personal things that make me feel stripped of my independence. The nights are the hardest. I can't count the number of times I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling a wave of grief crash over me, unable to hold back the tears. There's an emptiness that sets in when everything is quiet and I'm left alone with the weight of everything that's happened. I constantly wonder, why did it have to be us, me and Elaine? Why did God do this to us? Why are we punished this way? My parents see this. They've done all they can to support me emotionally, encouraging me every chance they get to think about moving forward, even if it's just in the smallest of steps. They have urged me to start physical therapy, trying to keep me focused on a path to recovery. I know they're right, and the doctors agree, advising me to take things slowly, to give myself time to heal mentally and physically. Everyone understands the mountain of grief I'm facing, and I feel their support in every gentle nudge they give me. For now, college is on hold. The dreams Elaine and I shared of going off together, of diving into that new chapter have been set aside, and I'm just focusing on making it through each day. Recovery has become my primary goal, not just physically, but emotionally too. I'm trying to give myself grace to take one day at a time and to find some sliver of normalcy in this new unfamiliar life. Then 2 weeks ago, my parents came into my room with unexpected news. They told me that my older sister, Ava, was coming to visit us next month. Ava is my older sister. She's been living abroad for a while now and we don't see her very often. Ava has rarely visited since moving there. So it's huge for her to come home, especially now. I could see how excited my parents were. They've missed her so much. My parents informed me that Ava was even bringing her new partner with her to visit us, someone we haven't yet met. I was really excited to see her and her new man, holding on to the hope that her visit will bring a bit of comfort and warmth to our family, maybe even a bit of healing for us all. Since then, I've noticed my parents and Ava have been on several video calls planning and discussing all the details of her upcoming visit. Ava is aware of my accident, of course. My parents made sure she knew right away. However, for some reason my sister could not visit me, so I thought that when she finally came home, we'd finally have the chance to reconnect. For context, Ava and I weren't particularly close growing up. She was already older when I was born, so by the time I was starting school she was in her teenage years focused on her friends, her studies and eventually her own career and life goals. She always seemed worlds away from me, more like a distant figure in my life than a sibling I could rely on. By the time I was old enough to really want a sister in my life, she was off living in another country, busy building her own life. After that, she hardly ever called or texted between us that was never fully bridged. When my accident happened, I hoped, maybe even expected, that she would come to see me, to be there by my side, but she never did. She stayed where she was and would sometimes check in on me. Even distant relatives came to see me, but my own sister never did. Honestly, at that moment, it did hurt me more than I let on, but I tried not to dwell on it. Despite everything, I was still looking forward to her visit, to seeing her in person and meeting her new partner. There was a small spark of hope that maybe this visit could bring us closer somehow, that maybe Ava would get to see me, not just as her younger sibling, but as someone she could truly connect with during this difficult time in my life. However, this week, my parents sat me down to tell me that they had something serious to discuss with me before Ava came to visit. This is when they informed me that after several discussions with my sister, the three of them felt it would be better if I moved out before her arrival. The suggestion came out of nowhere and I could hardly process it. What did they mean by move out? Move out? Where? With everything going on, the surgeries, the physical therapy and the sheer weight of adjusting to life in a wheelchair, I can hardly go anywhere. Home is the only place I feel truly safe and now they wanted me to leave? Stunned, I couldn't help but scoff at the idea. Where would I even go? I asked, barely able to keep the disbelief out of my voice. I had nowhere else, no other place to turn to. I expected them to realize how important their request was and take it back. But instead, they calmly suggested I stay with friends for a while or move into a hotel. My dad offered to cover the cost for a few days, saying I could use that time to find somewhere more permanent to live. I was completely floored. What was even happening? Their words felt unreal, as if I were listening to strangers, not the parents who had been by my side through everything. I tried to make them understand the gravity of their request. I asked them how they expected me to just stand up and leave, especially in my condition. I still had months of physical therapy ahead of me and was only just getting accustomed to life in a wheelchair and was still deeply grieving Elaine. I hadn't even begun to process my own future, much less find a place to live. I was in physical pain every day, and emotionally, I was barely holding myself together, so where exactly did they think I would go? That's when the truth came out. My parents said that they had been doing their best to care for me these past few months but they were now exhausted. They told me how they deserved to take a break from me. My mom told me how I was over 18 now, practically an adult, so them asking me to move out and live out my own life wasn't really an unreasonable request. My dad told me that he would even help me find a cheap apartment for me to live in and recover. My parents started telling me how there are thousands of disabled people like me who live on their own and recover, and I was going to be just fine on my own. I was so heartbroken and scared by what my parents were suggesting that I started to cry. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. I begged them to give me a few more months at least. I mean, I completely understand that taking care of me must have taken a toll on them. But this was all so sudden. I didn't even have time to prepare myself mentally. This is when my parents revealed that with Ava returning home with her new partner, the three of them wanted to have a good time. However, that wouldn't be possible if I was there since I constantly needed looking after. They also told me how having someone like me, a cripple as they put it, would be a bad look for the family since this new guy had no idea that Ava had a disabled sister, since my sister felt too ashamed to reveal it. Hence, they felt it was only right of them to ask me to move out before my sister and her partner came to visit. They urged me to be strong as if this was nothing. I sat there speechless as the realization of what they were saying sank in. In that moment, I was struck by a profound sense of betrayal. I was going through the hardest period of my life and now, when I needed them the most, they were shoving me aside like I didn't matter. I was no longer just dealing with the trauma of my accident or the pain of losing Elaine. I was now facing the heartache of feeling utterly abandoned by the very people I thought would always have my back. Since then, I've been scrambling to find someone willing to help me, even temporarily, but it's been far from easy. I've learned quickly that as much as my friends care about me, no one is in a position to take on the responsibility of living with someone in my condition. Most of my friends are in college, busy with classes, exams, and their social lives. It's understandable that they wouldn't want to or even be able to take on the demands of caring for someone like me, still healing from a traumatic accident. After exhausting my options with friends, I had no choice but to turn to family, though I wasn't sure what to expect. My dad is an only child and his parents have passed, so there isn't anyone immediate to turn to on his side. A few cousins were polite enough to show some interest when I reached out, but I could sense their hesitation. They were polite about it, but none of them showed real enthusiasm, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming an inconvenience to people around me. But then there was my mom's side. I know that my maternal grandparents are still alive, and they're financially well off. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would be able and willing to take me in, at least for a while. They'd always been a bit distant, but I thought that family, especially in times of hardship, might be able to rise to the occasion. When I brought this up to my mother though, she practically exploded at the suggestion, making it clear that reaching out to her parents was a bad idea. She forbade me from ever contacting them. Since childhood, I've been aware that my maternal grandparents have always kept a distance from us, never making any effort to be part of our lives. Although it wasn't something that was openly discussed, I understood that they had cut off all contact with us a long time ago. The reason behind this estrangement was always a mystery. No one ever explained why they stopped talking to us or what event or decision led to this silence. My parents never offered any details and, over time, I simply accepted it as one of those family secrets that no one ever fully uncovers. However, now, with nowhere else to turn, I find myself considering reaching out to them even though I know how my mom feels about it. She genuinely believes that if I make contact, it will invite them back into our lives and reopen past wounds. When I asked my mom directly about what had happened between her and her parents, she shut down almost immediately, refusing to share anything more than she already had. She insisted that it was none of my business and that I should look for help elsewhere. But at this point, I'm running out of choices. I feel like I've exhausted every other avenue and I can't do this alone. I don't want to bring chaos into our lives or hurt my mom, but the thought of being completely alone during such a vulnerable time is even more frightening. Ida, if I reach out to my grandparents after all these years of no contact? Update 1. Hi, everyone. First and foremost, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to every single one of you kind strangers who took the time to send me a thoughtful message, whether in my DMs or in the comments. To everyone who shared their own stories, thank you so much. Reading your words has truly made me feel so much better. Now for those of you asking why my parents, especially my mom, have forbidden me from reaching out to my grandparents, I honestly don't know much. All I know is that my mom says they hate us, but she's never given me any further explanation. However, after reading through all your comments, I'm starting to feel suspicious about my family. I can't help but wonder if there's some sort of family secret my parents have been keeping from me. I mean, why is it that my sister isn't close to me, or the fact that my parents have never introduced me to anyone from my mom's side of the family? It's beginning to feel like there's more to this than they're letting on. I've decided that I need to find out the truth one way or another. Update 2. It's been a week since I last updated. Just wanted to let everyone know that I finally talked to my grandma. After all the support and advice I received on Reddit, I realized I had nothing to lose by reaching out to my grandparents. Also, reaching out to them felt like my last shot at finding a safe place, not just physically, but emotionally. So I started my search by trying to connect with anyone on my mom's side of the family. With no direct contact, I turned to LinkedIn, where I eventually found someone who seemed to be related to her, a distant cousin of hers, if I guessed correctly. Reaching out felt awkward, and I debated for hours over what to say. In the end, I kept it straightforward, explaining that I was looking for a way to contact my grandparents and emphasizing that it was important. I urged them to share with me my grandparents' contact number. At first, they were hesitant. They asked why I wanted their contact information and seemed uncomfortable, almost like they didn't want to get involved. But after some back and forth and a bit of pleading, they relented. I was given my grandmother's number. I was so nervous to call her that I had to take 2 days just to think things over. Was I really doing the right thing by contacting her? I wasn't sure. When I finally mustered the courage to call that number, my heart was racing. After a few rings, my grandma finally picked up. I took a deep breath and introduced myself. And I told her who I was and who my mother is. There was silence on the other end for what felt like forever. Then she spoke, her voice a mix of surprise and wariness. "I didn't expect to ever hear from you. How did you find me?" I explained briefly how I got her number and why I was calling. She seemed pleasantly surprised that I had reached out to her. I took this as a good sign and started to tell her more about my situation, my life until now, my accident, my parents asking me to leave, and how I felt like I had no one else to turn to. Her tone softened as I spoke, though I could still sense hesitation. She told me how sorry she was that I was going through all of this, that I had been kicked out at my lowest point, but then she added something that left me stunned. "I can't say I'm all that surprised though, not with Ava coming to visit now after so long." I froze and asked her what she meant by that. Was there some family secret that I didn't know? There was a pause on her end, like my grandma was carefully considering how to phrase her next words. "Well," she began slowly, "I don't know how much your family has shared with you, but there's a reason we haven't been in touch." I told her I didn't know much, only that my mom had said they hated us. At that, my grandmother let out a humorless laugh. "Hate is a strong word, but there's a lot your mother hasn't told you." What she revealed next left me shaken to my core. She told me that years ago my mother had an affair with someone she worked with. She was caught red-handed by my dad, and their marriage nearly ended. According to my grandmother, my father was ready to leave and had publicly humiliated my mother in front of everyone. However, my mom begged him to stay when she discovered she was pregnant with me. She promised she would change and also convinced him to stay for the sake of my older sister, Ava. Apparently, my mom also threatened my dad that if he did seek divorce from her, she would make sure that Ava would grow up to hate my dad for leaving our mother pregnant and alone. Somehow, my dad was convinced that he forbade my mother from ever revealing to me or to anyone else that he wasn't my real father. However, my grandparents were deeply upset with my mom. They had always been traditional and held strong values about marriage and family. First of all, my mom had cheated, and on top of this, she was now going to raise me with my dad without ever telling me the truth. When they confronted my mom, things turned ugly. My grandmother said that my mom lashed out, accusing them of being judgmental and unsupportive. According to my mom, she felt like she was making the right decision and eventually cut ties with her entire side of the family so that they could never tell me the truth. Now, the reason why Ava hated me so much is because she knows everything. She was old enough at the time to remember exactly what my parents were fighting about. She hated that our mother had me, and on top of that, my parents asked her to not tell me anything about it. My grandma told me that this must be why Ava moved to another country as soon as she could. Obviously, she resented my parents for what had happened. I mean, this made sense why my sister had never liked spending any time with me, why she never talked to me much, or why my parents never let me spend any alone time with her much. What does that have to do with me being kicked out? I asked my grandmother, my voice trembling. She hesitated again and then said, "I think your parents, your mother especially, are desperate to keep things peaceful now that Ava is returning after so long. They've been trying to mend their relationship with her for a long time and, well, I'm sorry to say this, but I think they see you as a complication. Since you are technically an adult now, they no longer want to be responsible for you." Hearing this was like a punch to the gut. All my life, I had felt like there was something off, like there were pieces of my family puzzle missing. Now it all made sense. Why my mom's side of the family was a complete mystery. Why Ava had always been distant, and even why my parents treated me so differently. Clearly, this is why Ava and my parents didn't want me here now that she was returning with her new partner. Maybe my sister had not even told her boyfriend about me, since I am technically the result of an affair. I was stunned by how everything made sense to me now. In the end, my grandma assured me that no matter what had happened, she and the rest of my family were never angry at me. They just wanted my mom to tell me the truth and not hide things from me. My grandmother surprised me by saying, "You're not to blame for any of this. You're our grandchild no matter how things started." Her words brought me to tears. I told her how much it meant to hear her say that, especially after everything I'd been through. My grandma even reassured me that since I needed help with moving, she wanted me to move in with them. "You can't stay with us for as long as you want. We can hire help for you also, so don't worry about anything," my grandma said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For a while, I had started to feel unwanted, like a burden no one wanted to carry, and here was my grandma offering me her place. I immediately accepted her offer and told her to give me some time to figure things out. Now I'm preparing to leave. My grandmother has assured me that they'll help me get settled and support me as I continue my recovery. As for my parents, I haven't told them yet. I plan on confronting them just before I leave. I can't stand to even look at my mother's face after finding out about everything. Update 3. Okay, so I finally confronted my parents and moved out from my home. At first, when my grandparents came to visit to help me pack up my things, my mom was furious seeing them standing at our doorstep. She screamed at them asking what they were doing here, but I calmly told her that they were here for me. Her eyes widened in disbelief and her voice turned shrill. "What the hell have you done?" she yelled, her face contorted with fury. "You were never supposed to contact them again. Why would you go behind my back?" This is when I asked my mom and dad to sit down and told them that we needed to talk. At that moment, I could tell my dad already knew where this was going. He didn't say anything, didn't look me in the eye, and just slowly sat down on the couch, his hands clasped tightly together. It was as though he was preparing himself for something he'd been avoiding for years. My mother was still fuming, her eyes darting between me and her parents. "What's this all about?" she spat, but I could see the unease in her posture. I told my parents everything that my grandma revealed to me. The affair, the reason why my parents had cut off everyone from my mom's side, the reason why Ava never bonded with me, and lastly, what I thought was their reason for kicking me out. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. My mom's face flushed a mixture of shame and anger. She opened her mouth but no words came out. Her gaze flickered to my dad, who was still not looking at me. "Is any of this untrue?" I asked, my voice quiet but steady. My mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes now cast downward. She didn't say anything at first. I told her that there was no reason for her to lie to me anymore when I already knew everything. She then looked at my grandparents, pissed, as if she blamed them for what I was saying. Finally, my mom spoke. "Yes, it's true," she admitted. "I made a mistake, a huge mistake, and I thought if I kept it all hidden it would go away, but clearly it never did. Your sister hated us for what we did to her and moved away from home. Now that she's coming back, she has made it clear that she doesn't want to continue living in the same house as you. So it's either her or you." My mom told me that she had thought once I had gone away to college, things wouldn't be this difficult. However, because of the accident, I was stuck here and made their life even more difficult. She told me that she has no choice but to choose Ava now after hurting her for so long. I was so heartbroken when I heard that. I looked at my mom and then at my dad, a mix of anger and hurt swelling inside me. "You've been lying to me, to both of us for years," I said quietly. "And now after everything that's happened, you want me to just disappear? You want me to leave just because Ava hates me? Just because it would be easier for all of you if I was gone?" My mom couldn't look at me anymore. Her face was a picture of shame, regret, and anger. My dad, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke up. He told me that although he had come to love me, it just wasn't the same. After all, Ava was his real daughter, so he needed to think of her first. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I swallowed hard, trying to keep it together. Hearing those words from my parents felt like a knife to my chest. I had never truly been their real priority. I was the outsider, the reminder of the mistake my mom had made, and they were finally saying it out loud. I didn't know what to say anymore. What was the point of saying anything now when they clearly did not want me? I told my parents that since they were kicking me out and I had nowhere else to go, my grandparents had kindly offered to let me move in with them, so they didn't have to worry about me anymore. After I was gone, my parents and Eva could go back to pretending that they were the perfect family. I then turned to my grandparents, who had been silently watching from the side. I could see the sympathy in their eyes. I asked them to help me pack up my things in my room, and my grandma nodded. My grandpa gave me a hug and assured me that they were going to take care of me the best that they could. My mom looked absolutely furious with them, but there was nothing she could do. We eventually packed up all my things and important documents, and I left. Saying goodbye to my room was so hard. It felt like I was leaving years of my life behind, but I had no other choice. My mom shed a few tears as she watched me go, but my dad remained motionless. Once I was on the road with my grandparents, I couldn't hold it in anymore and cried a lot. Currently, I'm at my grandparents' place. They have a huge house, and I'm staying in one of the guest rooms downstairs since it's easier for me to access. I feel a bit out of place, but they seem kind to me. I keep waiting for my parents to call, but so far, there have been no calls.